happened to be the head of corporate security for Lucasfilm. And those relationships resonated with me. And I knew that, okay, I couldn't transition without help. So I imagine there's other people out there that are similar to me and they need help too. So what does that look like? And I started helping people almost immediately with transition and talking them through that, looking at their resume, talking to them about, what's the private sector like? What can they expect? Things like that. And so I've always been there to try and help people grow and understand what the private sector is like. But the video series or these posts came from a guy who I've known for a very, very long time, Ray O'Hara. And I lovingly call him the godfather of corporate security because he's been in the private sector for a very, very long time. But he too transitioned in retirement from the LA County Sheriff's Department. And so we started talking on this video series where we started talking about doing the video or doing a podcast or something. And what turned out was, hey, let's just get on and just start talking about what the challenges are and what those things are. And so the videos came about from his kind of prodding me to, hey, would you start talking about this with people? There's so many great opportunities out there to have these conversations. And it just kind of evolved, and it evolved even away from just he and I talking. We've done several, and we're going to do another one today in our conversations, but it just evolved into now I'm having conversations with other people, whether they be veterans or law enforcement, in their transition stories and what they would recommend to other people and that kind of stuff. And it just kind of is naturally evolving into being a much more adaptive thing. But I've always wanted to talk with people about this, and something that I've been kind of passionate about because I've seen some crazy transitions. People like come out of, senior GS-15 or SESs and SES positions, and they transition into something that's not worth their time. And I don't want to see that. I want to see them transition to something that they enjoy and that they'll find value in, and that will be a good match for them. That's the hard thing, is helping them through that, helping them realize that. So sure. It just kind of came naturally because I've always been communicative and wanted to help people. So
I like it. Okay, I just had a few questions. I thought maybe we could go through some things that I had thought of, things that people have asked me about, which hopefully you can help a little bit with and share.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, anything I can do to help, because I know, when I was in federal law enforcement, the retirement piece is very important, and a lot of people don't realize when they're in FLETC that, oh yeah, in 20 plus years, I'm going to be eligible to retire. What does that look like? So however I can help.
That blind behind you, could you try pulling that down about halfway? There we go.
How's that?
Better.
Better?
Yep. Okay, I'll just I'll ask you a few questions here. I mean, both financial and job related. So, talking with Scott Walker here, who's a former federal employee and who has transitioned to the private sector. And Scott was kind enough to spend a little time with me today and answer a few questions, and hopefully can help current federal law enforcement officers and get an idea of what the other side looks like. So Scott, thanks for joining me.
Good to be here.
And just ask a few questions. So one of the biggest questions that comes up when I'm talking with federal law enforcement officers, whether it's with DHS, FBI, DEA, whoever they're with, is what kind of skills are in high demand right now? Are there any things that they can do to, I guess, make their resume look better to have more demand in the private sector?
Definitely. The skills that I find are in most high demand, not necessarily skills, but industries. And we see a tremendous growth in financial services industry. One of the industries that is probably going to fare the best out of the pandemic is financial services. And within financial services is anything fraud related. So if you think about all the banks, and there's a huge list of them, you can find them on the SBA website, ton of banks or financial institutions that are involved in giving out the PPP loans. And so this government relief that's happening, and another wave is expected to occur as you probably as of this recording. POTUS has been pushing back on the latest pandemic relief, but it'll happen. If it doesn't happen this year, it'll happen in the new year, early on. So we've had several tranches or we will have several tranches of this loan going out. And the most recent statistic that I've seen is that 10 to 12% is fraud related. I think that's an underestimate. I think there's going to be probably up to as much as 25% that's fraud related. And because of that, the financial services industry is going to see the need to have many more people focusing on fraud. And so the one good thing about folks coming out of federal law enforcement is the majority of federal law enforcement officers that are transitioning to the private sector, I would say, are in the 1811 job category, and as well as maybe even the intelligence services. Both of those are good to transition and have the right skills to transition to a financial services company. So those skills are that investigative work, working with U.S. attorneys, working with other federal law enforcement, developing information that may be of a classified nature to be applied in a investigative capacity. So I think that's really good. I know a lot of people transition from big three-letter agencies like the FBI and DEA into corporate security. I'm looking at the future of corporate security as it relates to commercial real estate. And I don't know that that's going to see much of a boom in the future with the way the pandemic's been affecting corporate campuses right now. I think that we're probably going to see that kind of flatten rather than be in an upward trajectory as far as hiring positions, those kinds of things. So if I was giving advice to somebody coming out of federal law enforcement, I would focus on the investigative skills first, rather than and investigative opportunities rather than anything else, whether it be corporate security. And when I say corporate security, what I'm specifically talking about is physical security, whether that be on the actual installation and implementation side of physical security, cameras, gates, badge readers, doors, that kind of stuff, as well as corporate security programs such as executive protection or workplace violence, things like that, that go into protecting corporations. So those are the skills I think federal law enforcement has and should be applying across the board into the private sector.
Okay. So one other question related to that is, my experience has been that in the bigger cities, there's a lot more demand for retired or not necessarily retired. I mean, somebody like you, that you actually didn't retire with the federal government, you left early. Yep. So either one, people with federal law enforcement experience, it seems that there's a lot more demand in bigger cities. So can you shed a little light on that? Like bigger cities, are there regional areas where there's more demand? Is there any demand in smaller rural areas or no?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell two stories and then I'll explain why I tell those stories. But I've worked with several people in transition, whether they be military or veterans. And I've had conversations like that. When I first landed in tech, working for a global technology company, I got a call from a friend who is retiring from federal law enforcement. And he said, hey, I'm retiring into the Southeast in Florida. Are there any tech security jobs that I should be looking for? Are you guys hiring for tech security in Florida? And I was like, no. I mean, there are some tech jobs there, but they're not going to be in a big corporate campus type environment, security or investigative related more than likely. There in Florida, there's great hospitality and tourism and amusement park type security roles and investigative roles. But there aren't a ton of corporate security roles in technology companies because they're not based in Florida. Now, with the pandemic has changed that, but I'll relate another story. I had another friend who was transitioning from Hawaii and he wanted to move back home to Los Angeles. And he said, hey, I'm interested in a security role in Los Angeles. And I said, yeah, it's great. There's tons of great roles there. What are you thinking? Now, he was a investigator, non-supervisory. And he said, I don't know, I could be maybe the head of security for Disney. And I was like, well, the head of security for Disney is a retired deputy assistant director of the FBI. So just realize that you're probably not going to find the top security role without having another top leadership role in government. And so the misperception is, oh, I'm going to be heavily sought after and everybody wants my skills. And while that might be true, it is, you have to level set and set expectation that if you're coming from a non-supervisory position into a supervisory role, it's probably not going to be the top role. You've got to work your way up maybe and understand that those roles in leadership, they're looking for other people who have leadership experience. So that's kind of thing one. Thing two is the regionality of industry. And we look across our great United States and the reason why we're an economic powerhouse is because of the different regions in the United States. So you go from places like Houston in Texas that are great for oil and natural gas, shipping, transportation, things like that. You've got places like New York City, which is known for Wall Street and the financial sector, places like Los Angeles, which is known for entertainment, some aerospace, although that's dwindling. If Elon Musk moves SpaceX out of California to Texas, that would change things, as well as Seattle, which is known for tech and aerospace. Mm-hmm. So the way the United States has grown as a country over 100 plus 150 years has influenced where the jobs are. So usually what I ask is, when I'm working with somebody in transition, is where do you want to go? Where do you want to retire to? Where do you want to live? Where can you put up with living? I've had people say, oh, I want to work in tech because that's where they make the most money. They've got free food and all these buses and things. And I'm like, that's true. Yeah, that's all great. But are you ready to move to Seattle? Are you ready to move to the San Francisco Bay Area? And most people are horrified when I say that because they want to move to where it's affordable, right? The Bay Area is not, it's getting better, but it is not affordable for most people. And so that has to play into where you want to go and what you want to do. Now, again, the pandemic has changed a lot of that, but I don't know that companies are ready to hire somebody who's coming out of the FBI, Secret Service, DEA, whatever, into a role in a top leadership role or even a managerial role with a security, in a security role in a, let's say, technology company and let you live in Boise, Idaho. I don't know that we're there yet as a country, right? We're going in that direction. But a lot of these folks have no brand recognition when they're coming out of federal law enforcement. And when I say brand recognition, you acknowledge that, oh yeah, the FBI's got great brand recognition. I'm coming out of the FBI. Sure it does. But that person doesn't have brand recognition yet, unless you've laid the groundwork for years and worked with the certifying bodies that have different various certifications or the associations. Unless you put your time in there and you spent time on a board of a nonprofit or something to get kind of your brand out there, and you're working with different organizations to do that, you're just not going to have the brand recognition. And so that's the challenge. But what I recommend people do is take a look at where you want to go physically, geographically, and let's look at what businesses are the biggest there. And those are very simple Google searches. You could search, I live in Phoenix, Arizona. You could search the biggest employers in Phoenix. You would find that they're healthcare, by the way. And so if you're coming out of ATF, let's say, and you say, okay, I want to work in healthcare because that's big. I want to move to Phoenix, Arizona, and play golf a lot and be able to afford a home and those things. Great. What do you got to do now before you retire to make yourself valuable to a company like Banner or Honor Health that fits into your skill set as an investigator? More than likely, somebody coming out of ATF has got investigative experience and going with that. But can you transition into someplace that has a large health market and be valuable that way? So that's what people have to look at is where do you want to go? What are the industries that are there? Because more than likely, you're not going to just transition into the next 20-year career or a career for the next 20 years with one company. What I encourage people to do is look across several different companies and several different industries in a geographic location. And that should influence where you're going to go. I would love to live in Billings, Montana, but is there enough jobs there? Is enough industry there to support me? Because I know how companies rise and fall. They hire, they fire, they grow, they shrink. And I know you got to be resilient. And to be resilient, you've got to be able to pivot. And a pivot is, hey, I got a job today, but will it be there over time? And that's the big question mark, especially in the pandemic.
That's a great point. And I've had unfortunate situations happen to clients. I'm thinking of one client right now. She retired from the Bureau of Prisons and started an auditing job with a contractor. And it was a good job, and she was getting paid well. The hours were good, and they lost that contract 10 months after she switched. And she's in a smaller rural area, and there just weren't other opportunities there. So
that's it.
That's a great point. That when you need to do some due diligence if you're looking at retiring, going into the private sector, and you're not ready to fully retire. So, leaving federal government because you don't have the security in the private sector that you do with the government.
No, that's something I deal with a lot too. Is it's a different type of security for me. I actually like the ability to pivot, mainly because I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to business. I like trying to understand different industries and different companies and what their growth model is, and then what are the different positions that they're going to need there. One of the examples I give is Tesla. Tesla is pivoting out of California, and they're building a gigafactory in Texas. So what does that mean? Okay, well, that means that Texas is going to get, 5,000 new jobs, and I think they're just outside of Austin. So geographically, okay, great. That's good for the Austin economy. But what kind of jobs are going to be there? Okay, manufacturing, great. What kind of jobs go with manufacturing? You're going to have people that are turning wrenches on cars and putting together automobiles, right? Or trucks or whatever they're going to build. That's going to be true. But there's also support roles. There's security support roles. There's employee health and safety support roles. So what I know is when I see an investment, a multi-billion-dollar investment like what Tesla is making in the gigafactory in Texas, based on my business knowledge, and you're probably following along with where I'm going with your knowledge of business, there's lots of other support roles around that. There's auditing support roles. There may be a few investigator support roles. There's legal support roles. There's human resources support roles that will go and be part of that 5,000 new jobs in Texas. Mm-hmm. So as I look across the way business is flowing, the way people are doing things, the states that are open, the states that are closed, and how that's affecting business. I caution people now from jumping out of government because of those points about security. If you have a job, you might want to hang on to that job just for now. Let's figure out where we're going in 2021. I think we'll have a better idea by summer of 2021 how things are turning out, whether that be pandemic-wise or political or even geopolitics with what this most recent hack by Russia or alleged hack by Russia, the way China is progressing in their expanse in Asia Pacific and growing their islands, what's going to happen with Taiwan, like all of that influences the global economy along with a pandemic. So when people decide like, I'm out of here, I'm leaving, I'm retiring from the FBI, I'm tired, or I'm retiring from federal service and I'm tired of dealing with it for whatever reason, just realize that there are unknowns, but it's not impossible to be resilient in this environment. I think things will take longer. It'll take longer for people to be hired. It'll take longer for people to move around. A lot of the programs that in corporate security that were very impactful to a business. For example, travel security is a program within most corporate security. Big international companies have a travel security program. That means that you've got employees that are flying around the world and you've got to account for them. You've got to take care of them. You've got to ensure that they're getting from point A to point B. Maybe you have to ensure that they have safe transport. Maybe you have to assure their health, things like that. So those programs in corporate security are going to be diminished because people can't travel. There's a travel ban right now with the UK. So corporations are not worried about tracking employees that are coming and going to the UK because you can't, right? So just realize that the global pandemic, global politics are going to affect what the jobs look like on the outside or in the private sector. And so that's just kind of, how I perceive it, how I look at that.
Definitely a valid point that there's a lot of unknowns right now in all industries with the pandemic, which brings up another point that I can't. It seems like everybody that I've talked to here in the past, say, 6 months in law enforcement has at least mentioned to me how poor morale is within law enforcement in general. And they've, where I used to talk to a lot of people that really, really enjoy their jobs and love them. Lately, it's with this push against law enforcement, it just puts a lot of law enforcement employees in bad positions right now, and a lot of them wanting to get out of it. So I had one guy telling me that he said, it's ugly right now. We're struggling to hire qualified people, and anybody that can get out now is getting out. Now, with that being said, and I get it, it's not something I'd want to do right now with the environment that we have. But still, as you're saying, you still need to do your due diligence. If you can't afford to retire and live on your FERS annuity, your supplement, Social Security, TSP, you need to look at what your options are outside of federal employment. And I would urge you to look into that before retiring. Don't make a brash decision. Take your time. You still have time. Use your annual leave up if you need to get a break. Maybe a little sick time.
Mental health days are important.
Sure, absolutely. One point that you had brought up to me previously, which I just want to touch on for a minute, is compensation structure. And most of the people that I talk to, they're looking at retiring and then moving into private sector. So looking at, maybe a 5, 10, 15-year career after federal employment. However, there are those that do look at doing it like you did, where, maybe they get 10 years or something like that in with federal law enforcement, and then they see opportunities outside of government that interest them, which, as we talked about, is different in many ways, but it's different compensation structure as well.
Right.
So with the government, you have your pension, you have your matching, you have great health care, but a large source of your, I guess, of your benefits is comprised of that pension. And then, your supplement that you get as well. However, it's a little different in the private sector. So
That's right.
Give us a couple points of how it might be different.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go salary, benefits, and I'll say retirement, but I also mean stock.
Okay.
So it goes back to that geographic industry kind of mix, right? Some of the highest paying roles are going to be in finance and technology, because that's just basically how they pay. They want the best people, and they can afford to pay you. One thing's for sure, banks don't lose money. Okay.
Sure.
So finance is always going to do fine. Technology is pretty bulletproof as far as very successfully. Look at the top 10 most successful companies in the world. By the way, I think all but 2 are American companies. The other 2, Alibaba and another Chinese company. So in the top 10, now out of those remaining 8 that are American companies, by the way, those remaining 8, I think the majority of them are technology companies, all but a couple. So tech is always going to do well. And again, they can attract the biggest talent. Now they're the biggest companies. Apple is one of the biggest companies in the world, right? Even with its valuation, is quite a large company. So industry matters, and location matters. You live in the Bay Area of San Francisco or New York City, you're going to have to make a 200K to kind of be able to afford what we would call a normal life. That's 2 cars, a house, and kind of the nuclear family option. If you go to places like Texas or Arizona or Florida, those similar jobs, the salary will vary. But let me talk about the hierarchy of leadership in what I'll say corporate security wise. In a corporate program, you'll have at the very top a vice president, a director, senior director, some type of position like that. It also may be called CSO, Chief Security Officer. Then you'll have managers and supervisors, and then essentially line workers. Directors manage programs or regions of the world, or other managers. They can also be in charge of the whole program. It just depends on the size of the company and the makeup of the company. And when I say program, I mean very broadly, a very broad term for security, which may include safety, which is something I had to learn. I had to learn a lot about employee health and safety, OSHA requirements, things like that. Managers manage supervisors or programs that are maybe smaller, like you could have a manager of insider threat. And insider threat meaning looking for people that are exploiting the weaknesses in a company, they're stealing information, they're bribing other officials, things like that. And then supervisors supervise workers, and workers don't supervise anybody, but they do the work that needs to be done. Workers are also called ICs, individual contributors. So you may hear that term in business a lot. And that means non-supervisory, but you're doing a specific task or role or job. So depending on the region of the US that you're in and the industry, directors who are in charge of much bigger programs or bigger regions of the world, or the whole program itself, are probably making depending on the, I'm going to give a very broad angle here, but it really depends on the type of job that you're doing in the industry that you're doing it in. But you're probably looking at anywhere between 150 and 350 K per year. So on equivalent, on capacity with a GS-15 and above would be where I would expect to see the equivalent in federal service be able to transition over to. Mm-hmm. So if you're leading people in federal service, you're probably looking at a leadership role in the private sector of some sort. And again, depending on the size of the company, I mean, shoot, big companies like Boeing or Disney that are massive, GE, you know, they're probably paying their folks above 350K a year. But those positions are very few and far between. You know, the other roles within the private sector that federal law enforcement could transition into is some things we just talked about, like investigations. And that could be, you do have investigation leaders, directors, managers, so on, as well as investigators themselves. Investigations roles could be anywhere between, depending on where you're at, 75K to 200K. You know, if you work as a vice president of investigations for a large insurance company like USAA or Farmers, you're probably making north of 200, depending on your location in the world. So with all that said, it really does, as far as salary goes, it goes back to your location. Where do you want to retire to? What do the jobs look like there? What I recommend people do is start talking to people that are in those regions that are doing those jobs and ask them. You know, here in Phoenix, somebody in a financial or a fraud investigator type role should be making north of 85 to 120 is where it's bracketed, depending on what industry you're in. Okay. And we've got tech and all kinds of stuff. Go ahead.
No, agreeing with you. I'm with you.
So let's talk about benefits, and then we'll talk about retirement. So benefits also depend on what industry, where you go, what you do. Generally, what I have found working for 2 tech companies, the benefits were better than what I got in federal service, better than what I got in the military, and may include things that we're not used to as federal employees. I'll just say that. You can negotiate to some extent with the employer on what benefits you're going to receive. And what I encourage people to do is don't narrow your focus to benefits to mean medical, dental, and vision. Include things like dry cleaning and certain home services, like, hey, I'm going to be a vice president for your bank, working in your corporate security division, and I'm going to be working a lot. I'm traveling a lot. Can you provide me some home cleaning, something to take care of my car? You know, can I get car washes and oil changes at some discounted rate, or can you support me there? There may be ways that companies can incentivize bringing you over, and that might be something that you can receive as well, that I've heard. I've never received those services as a stated benefit, but I have received services like when I worked for Facebook, they drove me to and from home on a bus. That was a benefit. You know, that at the pre-pandemic, they had some of the most transportation buses in the Bay Area because they drove people all over the place. So those are all benefits that people should consider, as well as like free food and we had free beer and alcohol at Facebook. So those are benefits. Retirement. So when I transitioned, I'll tell you my quick story. When I transitioned to the private sector, my recruiter from NVIDIA called me and said, hey, this is where your salary is going to be. And I was like, that's amazing. I'm GS 13 step 4 now. You put 25% on top of that. It was way better than I would ever see in federal service. But then he said, here's your benefits. And by the way, here are the RSUs that we're going to give you. This is a set amount. I can't give you any more. That's what they're at. That's what we're given. And I was like, great, what's an RSU? I had no idea. And so he educated me on what an RSU was. It's just essentially stock that vested over time. What that meant was the longer I stayed in the role, the more stock I had. Same thing for every year I would get a bonus. And the funny thing was that NVIDIA in the early days, they were giving tons of stock away. And I was like, I just give me cash. I don't want the stock, because it was $13. It was virtually worthless. Now, knock on wood, take a look. I don't know what the stock price. I can't look at it anymore. It freaks me out because it's $400 or $500, something like that. $520, I think was the last time I looked at it. So it did amazing over the last 6 years. I'd like to think that I helped a little bit with that somehow, somewhere. But joking aside, that's impactful, right? It's the thing that allowed me to move from California to Arizona and, allowed me to afford things. So think about stock when you're transitioning. Have that conversation with your recruiter or with the HR people that you're working with, because it can be impactful to you. If stock is a big thing in tech companies. It's not every industry gives stock. It's a big deal for tech companies. Like when I landed at Facebook, we were tranching out vesting of stock every 3 months, because Facebook is a revolving door. So they know, they're like, okay, we want you to see value quickly at Facebook because you might be gone in 6 months. So I went through several vestings of stock in my short time there. So that is something that I want people to work with folks like yourself and educate themselves on in the private sector, because that could influence where you go. Do you want to aim for a tech company like Google or Apple or Facebook because of the opportunity there is very good, that over time you could do very well with stock? And the old joke from the first employees at Google, the janitor is now a multimillionaire. And that's, we joke about that, but that's a reality in Silicon Valley, is that you could, if you invest well and you work smart, you could easily come out of a company much better than when you went into it. That was my experience, but I want people to know that that's not every experience, and that they should be educating themselves on what the stock market is, where to divest, work with a financial planner, work with a financial advisor, who are all licensed, by the way, and be smart about what that looks like. I also had a 401k with NVIDIA and Facebook, and those are things that you can carry with you to different organizations. So just know that when you land, you're not just looking at like, well, what's my TSP look like? You're going to have an opportunity to not only invest in the company and buy stock at a reduced rate, do that, but also to divest your retirement. So if you pick up a 401k or a 403b with one company, just know that all you got to do is roll that into, if you end up going to another company, it's not a big deal. And those retirements can travel with you, but be smart about it. Ask questions early on. The recruiter or that first phone call you get, they'll ask you, hey, do you have any questions? Yeah, talk to me about your benefits package. What does that look like? What kind of things do you offer? And my experience is most of the time, they're going to be truthful with you. They'll tell you everything that you could ever want and things that you were like, I'll never use that. I don't need healthcare. I've got my retired military healthcare or whatever. So that's been my advice for people over time, is just to educate yourself. There's only one way to do it, is to talk with people and find out. Talk to your peers that are already in the private sector. If you're part of the FBI Retired Agents Association, I think it's called the former FBI Agents Association, ask them. Talk to the guys that are at Boeing or at McDonnell Douglas or at Google and find out how they retired. What does that look like?
I think that's a great point. And there's, and we're talking more about bigger companies when we're talking about this, but a smaller company may not have much luck with that. But if you're looking at a bigger company like the tech companies you're talking about, at Boeing, any large company, if you're working for a federal law enforcement agency, there's likely going to be people that have retired from there that are now working at that company. So you can do it. I mean, there's a couple different ways to do it. I mean, you guys may have chat boards, Facebook groups. I don't even know what.
That's right.
I've seen, you've got the FLEOA, Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. Yep. You can maybe contact somebody there and say, hey, if it's Boeing, like I'm in Illinois and we've got Boeing in St. Louis. Yep. Hey, do you know anybody that has retired in the past 10 years and is working at Boeing? Or they have a chat board or something. And there's if you need to, there's ways you can do it anonymously. I don't know that you would need to do that, but you can do something like that. Or how you and I connected on LinkedIn.
That's it.
You can do searches on LinkedIn, security at Boeing, and see what you find there. If you find, say that you have 20 people pop up, look at their background. Maybe they work for the FBI or ATF. If you find a connection there, reach out to them. A lot of people are willing to help. There's a lot of people like Scott willing to help other people out that are in situations like what they were previously in. So I think that's a great point. And no better way to learn than by talking to somebody that has firsthand experience.
And I like the commonality to, hey, we were in the same agency or we come from the same background. We were both in the military before going to federal, whatever. And because I think that there's some due diligence that can be done there. If it's like, oh, I don't usually talk to people that didn't work for the CIA. There's ways you can check each other's backgrounds out and do that kind of that. When two dogs meet, what do? They check each other out, right? And so I like finding people with common backgrounds. If you're coming out of New York Police Department, go find somebody who's also coming from New York Police Department or St. Louis Police Department. If they've got a similar background to you, they're probably more likely to talk with you. And because I've had people tell me, oh yeah, I hit like 10 people up on LinkedIn and nobody's gotten back to me. Don't be discouraged by that. The people are busy, and they're maybe not as attentive as they should be. But don't let that be a discouragement. Keep talking with people, because this is the only way. I mean, the only way we're going to do anything positive for the world is through our networks and through the tribe. That is the essence of who we are, even as federal employees. We should be helping each other. And that's been my goal. I kind of tongue in cheek say, I want to put a cop in every company and a veteran in every business. But I do mean that. I really think to make businesses more resilient, especially in a pandemic world, especially in the kind of international crisis that we're involved in, what we need to do is get folks who have bravery and courage under fire and can be calm in the face of chaos, get them into those businesses. They can help. It may not be intuitive what they're going to do, but when they get there, there will be, the business will be more resilient if you listen to them. So that's kind of been my approach. And I hope that folks that you're talking with and that you're working with will see that as well. And if they want to reach out to me, happy to talk with them. But reach out to your community, figure out what your community is, who's your tribe, and use them, because they do want to talk with you. They want to help you because they want more folks like them, I guarantee it, in whatever organization they're in.
Sure. So. And for anybody wanting more information, Scott and I connected on LinkedIn. I saw some interviews that he's done. He's done a bunch of interviews with former, I guess, government, not necessarily federal, but
it's not just exclusive federal. Yeah.
So
some military, some local.
Sure. So a lot of law enforcement people have transitioned to the private sector, and they cover all kinds of different topics. So if you're looking for more resources, check out Scott there on LinkedIn. You can find a lot of videos there.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Any parting words of wisdom, Scott?
The what I tell everybody, I stole the line from FLEOA, but I'm a FLEOA member, so I think I can do that. But don't go it alone. You know, that's something that FLEOA is there for its members. And I'd like to think that the tribe or the community of former federal law enforcement or former government agents, as well as military, are there to help. They are resources for you. And so don't feel like you're ever out there kind of on your own. It may feel like that initially. And to your point about all the people I've been talking with and posting on LinkedIn, I have another great conversation with a buddy of mine who we did task force work together. And we talk about that emotional issue of like, you feel like, well, I'm out here in the wilderness all by myself. And you may feel like that, but that's not true. There's we just have to have a different perception about our assistance. You know, our assistance is not going to come from somebody who wears a patch or has a badge or, you know, comes from a certain agency. It's going to be from other professionals like ourselves with a similar background who are now working in the private sector that will support each other. So for what it's worth, that you just have a different tribe that you're working with. It's going to feel different. It's going to take some time to learn how to reach out to them and to connect with them, but sure. They're there.
Yep. Good stuff. Okay. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. Yep. Good talking with you.
So I'll send you the recording.
Okay.
So you can you're welcome to do whatever you want with it.
Thank you. Same with you too, Brad. Please, you know, let's get it out as far as we can, as widely as possible.
I'll probably make some cuts and post some different videos. I'm going to, not sure exactly what I'm going to do there, but there's a government, fedsmith.com.
Okay.
So I write a lot of blog posts and I send them to them, and I may ask them if they have any interest in posting, you know, parts of our video on the website as well, or maybe write a short article with some excerpts from it. And if I do, I'll let you know.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, and if you send me a link to the article, I'll put it out on my social media and broadly as we can. We'll get the word out. I think this is a really good way to reach out to folks. You know, I think a lot of folks, especially going into the holidays, a lot of people are going to be sitting on their couch hopefully watching football, but who knows? You know, maybe and hopefully with the family.